The Smiling Man. I'm aware that that title sounds like a horror movie or creepypasta, and if I hadn't lived it, I would think it was. This is one of many stories I have from working the night shift at a laundromat in a bad area, and is definitely the freakiest. So for some context, my mom took a job years ago at a local laundromat because she knew the owner and needed extra money. I was around 10 when she got the job, and she allowed me to come with her because she'd give me a little allowance for helping her do small tasks. I ended up going with her every night for years, and as I got older, I mainly went there to make sure that my mom was safe because I worried about her. We'd regularly deal with angry customers refusing to leave, most of which were drunk or high, and would have to call the police a few times. My mom was always worried about me tagging along, but I insisted, and to this day I still can't say I regret it. A lot of good came out of it, mainly work experience, and that made up for how intense it could be. I have a lot of interesting stories from that time, but this one takes the cake for the most horrifying, and it took place when I was about 12. Being the young and dumb kid I was, I designated myself the job of chasing off people when it was closing time. We would have people parking behind the building pretty regularly, so I'd walk to the side of the building and start yelling that they were now trespassing, and I would call the cops if they didn't leave. I feel this was important to bring up because I now realize I'll let any shady person hanging around the building at night know of my presence, and that's a dangerous thing to do when you're a 12-year-old girl. I was blissfully unaware that anything could happen to me until one night when we showed up to find the door lock had been broken. My mom had unlocked the building that morning, so it wasn't like this was a break-in attempt since it had been unlocked all day. We were a bit shaken up, but my mom texted her boss to let him know and just told me to tell her if I saw anyone pull up. After about 30 minutes, I finished my few tasks and sat down to draw on my sketchbook. I had barely sat down for a few minutes when I heard the door swing open, which startled me because normally people just knock when they see the very obvious close sign. My mom noticed it too and yelled that we were closed. I heard an older man's voice respond, explaining that he had just came in to use our drink machine. We normally let people in to use our snack and drink machines, so my mom told him he had a few minutes and went back into the closet to grab something. I was sat about 7 feet away from the drink machine, so I heard him walk up, but didn't really pay too much attention to him. I continued to draw until I started getting this feeling that someone was watching me, and when I realized I didn't hear the guy put any money into the drink machine, I nervously glanced to my left and saw a tall man in his mid-60s staring right at me with a big smile on his face. I jumped a little, but forced an awkward smile back at him and directed my attention back to my drawing. As soon as I did this, I heard what sounded like shuffling, and when I looked over again, he was closer. I didn't know what to do, so I tried to just not look at him. But every time I would look away, he would shuffle closer, his body still facing the drink machine, but his neck craned in my direction, and he wouldn't stop smiling and staring. I began shaking and panicking, and my eyes were darting back and forth between him and the closet door while I tried to plan a fast escape. I went to reach for the knife in my bag because I couldn't even imagine this man's intentions, and quickly realized that it was not there. I had left my knife at home when I needed it the most, and I was petrified. I decided to just stare back at him, despite being terrified and trembling violently. And after what felt like an eternity, he suddenly broke eye contact and yelled to my mom to have a good night before turning around and walking out. Relief hit me instantly, and I tried to calm myself down after what just happened. I thought I was finally safe and started to get up to splash some water on my face when I saw him sit down on the bench outside. Panic and dread hit me like a brick and I sprinted to the closet to hide. I filled my mom in on everything, and she told me to run to the car and that she would get between me and him with pepper spray if needed. I did as she told me and ran to the car, and as I passed him, he stood up and began walking towards the car. My mom yelled at him to get away from her car, and his reaction was to try to calmly start a conversation about the make and model of the car while staring right at me. She ignored him, hopped in the car, locked us in, and started backing up as quickly as she could. I ducked down in my seat, but could still see him standing there. And I know he could see me because I watched as he lifted his hand and waved goodbye before walking around the back of the building, disappearing into the darkness. I felt sick. I couldn't sleep that night. I never dared to set foot anywhere near that building again, so I guess that was a lesson learned. Creepy old smiling man, let's not meet again. It was summer break, and we, my family, didn't go on any trips, unlike every break. I was 8 years old and my younger sister was 3. We were playing along with other kids who lived in the same building as us, just on different floors. The building is not exactly an apartment building, it's more of a multi-story house. The front gate is a bit further from there, and the only entrance and exit of the building. So, since we were downstairs and playing, anybody who would enter or exit the building would be visible to us, and we would greet them because every tenant knows us, and we know them, as well as their family members who might visit them. A new person visiting a tenant is rare, but not impossible. Right adjacent to the big entrance gate is a small old-style window with a grill, but has a small opening at the bottom. We were all playing, but then I got tired and sat on one of the chairs placed in a porch-like place. Not sure what exactly to call it, to be honest. From where the window thingy falls on my right side, and I could see it as well as the gate clearly. I was just looking out when I noticed a man staring at the gate. So basically, he was able to look at my sister and friends through it. It concerned me when I realized that he wasn't even trying to look away and was just staring at them blankly. I turned around from where I was sitting to signal my friends to move to the other side, away from his sight, which she didn't understand. Frustrated, I turned back and was about to stand up when my gaze fell on the guy, and he was now staring at me. My body froze, and I could feel the fear creeping up on me. I couldn't move. I don't know why I stared back at him, and suddenly he started smiling. And when I say smiling, he was full on grinning from ear to ear. That scared the soul out of me, and I mustered some courage, got up and ran towards my friends. I didn't tell them anything, and just asked them to go upstairs with me, which thankfully they did without questioning. I didn't tell anything about this to my parents because I thought they would stop me from going downstairs to play. The next day, we came again to play, and I looked through the window just to make sure he wasn't there. Fortunately, he wasn't, or so I thought. 15 minutes in, I spot this guy again. He was just standing there in the very same spot staring at us, at me. I tried to play it cool because my friends knew nothing about him, but I couldn't do it for long, and we went back up again. From what I can remember, this happened about 3 to 4 days, and now my friends were starting to complain how I didn't let them play, and that they had to come back up earlier than they were supposed to. On the 4th or 5th day, I don't remember correctly, I made up my mind not to pay attention to him and just focus on playing. We were playing cricket and I was batting. I hit the ball hard, causing it to go over the gate, which was a normal thing. And as per rules, it made us, the one responsible, must fetch the ball. My heart started beating because I could see his grin getting wider and creepier. He went towards the ball on the road and picked it up. He then held out his hand, gesturing me to come take it. I was scared shitless at this point, but I had to go, so I did. As soon as I reached to take the ball from his hand, he bent over, coming close to my ear, and his words still ring clearly in my ears till this day. I'm a good man. Look at the window when you go inside. I'll leave something for you. This is a rough translation in English. It sounded much worse. That sent shivers down my spine, and I ran with the speed of light. After we were done playing, I saw him sliding a piece of paper from the little opening. He then looked at me, grinned, and waved goodbye. I grabbed the paper and opened it. He had written his number and asked me to call him at 2 o'clock sharp in the afternoon, and that he knew my parents would be asleep by that time. It was also written that if I didn't do it, my friends' lives would be in danger. As an 8-year-old, I didn't know any better, so I called him through my mother's phone. He picked up the call, but I didn't have the courage to say anything, so I was silent. He said, "You're a good girl. You should come stay with me. Come outside, I'm waiting to pick you up." Because I live upstairs, I went to the balcony, and he was actually standing next to the gate, looking directly at me, waving and smiling. I couldn't contain it anymore, so I started crying and disconnected the call. I ran inside and bawled my eyes out in my room. Thankfully, my mother didn't wake up, and I cried it all out. I didn't go out for the next few weeks, and everyone kept asking about it. I still didn't tell them, though. The guy stopped coming too. I don't remember the time he stopped coming, but he did, and I was relieved. Eventually, this experience started fading, and I grew up. Fast forward 10 years. I'm 18 and my mother asked me to buy some snacks. I took my sister and went out. The shop I had to go to was at the end of the road, several houses away, so not far. I was standing in a queue when I felt uncomfortable because of the man standing behind me, because he kept pushing me. Annoyed, I looked back at him, only to realize it was the same man. My face went pale, and I could hear my heart throbbing in my throat. I tried not to panic and calm myself down, telling myself that he couldn't do anything in public. There were tons of people there, and that gave me a sense of security. As soon as my order came, I took out my wallet hastily to pay, but he beat me to it. The owner looked at him weirdly and then at me. Because I was a regular there, and he was seeing me with this man for the first time, I paid for it anyway, and the owner politely asked him to take his money back. I gave the bag to my sister and asked her to go home and inform my mom that the man was following us. Just in case he attacks, I'll have a backing, and she'll be safe too. Our house is within vision range of the shop, so I waited for her to get inside. And now, it was my turn to go home. As soon as I stepped out, the man followed me and said something like, "You're a beautiful lady now, let's catch up." I kept walking and walking, but now that we were far from the shop, he started speed walking, and I had to walk faster. I could feel goosebumps all over my body. I started running and I could see him catching up to my speed when the owner called for him loudly, saying that some of the money was still on the counter and asking him to come back, which gave me enough time to get inside and lock the gate. I haven't seen him since that day, and it's been 2 years. I'm 20 right now, and I hope I never meet him anywhere in the future. I hope I never see him again, and I don't know why it's instilled a paranoia in me, and I dread seeing him when I turn 28. Edit. I told my mom everything after that. Because my dad lives in another city for work, I didn't tell him since it would make him hella worried and possibly affect his work. My distant uncle is a local cop. He's quite close and trustworthy. We tried finding the creepy guy after that, but couldn't. He literally vanished in thin air. We asked the shop owner about him, but he said the guy came back, took his money, and went away. Nobody else paid enough attention to this guy, so we couldn't find anything. I go to college by public transport, so I have to walk around 1 kilometer to reach the stop. I take the other road, which is opposite to the road that leads to the shop. It takes longer, but I feel better at least. Not once have I seen that guy or felt anything creepy since then, which is a relief. But again, I'm kind of paranoid every time I step out, though I do carry pepper spray and a sharp keychain with me at all times. About moving out, we can't afford that just yet. Possibly after I complete my degree, which still has 3 years left. I'm a 25-year-old non-binary person renting a 4-bedroom house. One of my roommates is my boyfriend, and the other is my best friend of 10 years. We'll call her Tracy. We have been looking for a new roommate, and because of the way this situation turned out, we have determined that I'm no longer in charge of looking for roommates because I'm not judgmental enough and am known to ignore red flags. I will start at the beginning, which is the house showing. So, our new prospective roommate showed up to the house showing and introduced himself. He definitely seemed strange at first, but I wrote it off as him just being eccentric. The main red flag was that at some point he randomly said something to the effect of, "And I will not bring meth into your house because I'm not on meth. I hate them and I see them as a scourge on this entire country." I didn't ask, so I was immediately weirded out, but my boyfriend and the roommate who was moving out also met the guy, and they both thought that apart from that, he seemed normal. He didn't look like a stereotypical meth head. His skin was clear and he was kind of chubby. We thought that maybe he thought I was a meth head because I'm a little bit scary. I have green hair, a 1-gauge septum, and 6 facial piercings. In addition, my roommate who was moving out turned out to be hiding a cat, which made the whole house smell like cat piss, which I've been told is what meth smells like. Also, the town that this guy is coming from is known for meth and crack, and he seemed to be explicitly trying to stay away from that town. So I thought maybe he was afraid of ending up in a situation where he was living with drug addicts and was trying to suss us out that way. Giving him the benefit of the doubt was my first mistake. Tracy and I were both wigged out about the entire thing, but we were kind of desperate for a roommate, and all the other people responding to the listing were not great fits, or were even sketchier than this guy, so we let him move in. Skip to the move-in date. He brings the old man to help him move his stuff. He then proceeds to make the old man move all the things by himself up the stairs while he sits there, including a refrigerator, by himself. New guy signs the lease. Immediately after signing the lease, he informs us that he did not include himself using a real name and proceeds to tell us his real name. This man was not transgender, so the only reason I could think of why he initially gave us a fake name is probably so he could avoid us running a background check. After this, I had to go to work. Throughout my shift, Tracy sends me a message that this guy is weird, but her responses are vague. I didn't find out what happened until I got home. Here's what she told me. New guy goes to the bar after signing the lease and comes back after being kicked out before 9 p.m. The bar he went to is a biker bar that is notorious for being rowdy. It's hard to get kicked out of there. You pretty much have to do something heinous, or you have to be creeping on a woman in order to get kicked out. When he comes back, he's drunk off his ass and says, The men must have been intimidated by me. It sounds to me like he was creeping. Before this, I had told the new guy that our landlord is coming the next day to fix some things in the house. When the new guy came home, Tracy reminded him that the landlord was coming the next day. He became extremely angry to the point where he's flailing his arms around, and she thought that he was going to start breaking things. Tracy was so uncomfortable that she almost went to wake up my boyfriend in the other room. Eventually, the new guy calmed down. However, there is a beanbag chair next to the couch, and Tracy is sitting on the beanbag with her legs slung over the armrest of the couch. At first, the new guy sat on the couch. He begins to read off poetry that he wrote to her for an entire hour and a half, all of which is literally just streams of consciousness about how he wants all junkies to die. Afterwards, he started telling her how beautiful she was over and over again, and literally lays his head down between her legs. She's trying to ignore him, and he won't stop asking her if she fell asleep. Every time she moves, he gets closer. Then, he starts inviting her to his room for a beer. Eventually, she gets up and goes into her room at 11 p.m. This man harassed her for 2 entire hours. I thought that was everything, but then she tells me that she sent the guy's picture to her mom, who sent the picture to everyone she knows from the town that he previously was living in. It turned out that he had been stalking Tracy's aunt for an entire year, and that he's banned from the bar she works at because he's threatened to kidnap her. She literally has to be escorted out, not only by workers but customers, to her car sometimes. So we tell our landlord. Luckily, our lease hadn't been finalized yet, so he agreed to kick him out. I call my mom to come over, and Tracy calls her brother for backup just in case things go south. Our landlord shows up and essentially tells him that he needs to leave and doesn't even let the new guy get a word in. The new guy starts getting agitated and aggressive, so we call the cops and several officers show up. Told the guy that he had no legal standing as there was no lease. He introduced himself to us with a fake name, and he hadn't even been there for 24 hours, and that he had to get out. The guy had to beg his sister to come pick him up, and she was so unwilling to do that she didn't agree until he offered to pay her $200. It's a 20-minute ride to where he was going. He left most of his stuff on our porch. When we went into his room, it smelled like cigarettes, and there was an empty pack on the floor, including not one or two, but 7 empty Dr. Pepper cans, and garbage everywhere, even crusty socks. The entire situation had me so stressed out that I didn't even notice that he had left a pair of pissy shorts in the middle of the house main hallway, and that's the first thing you see when you walk into the house. They were there for an entire day when he knew the landlord was coming. They were sitting there when he left. I picked them up with a glove and put them on the porch for him to retrieve, but who knows if and when he did retrieve those things, because he came back earlier, touched his things like he was going to take them, and then just immediately left. All I have to say is that I'm really relieved that we caught on to this before the lease was finalized, because it easily could have turned into a situation where me and Tracy were being sexually assaulted, or worse. Thanks for listening to my story. I'm a 36-year-old male. My parents divorced when I was 4 or 5 years old. During and after the divorce, my brother, let's call him Chris, my mom, and I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment townhouse. Now this was not the nice townhouse you may imagine. It was a complete shithole per se. They were older, built in the 1960s. This was in the 1990s. And is in a rougher part of town. Something a single mother with 2 kids could swing. The layout to the apartment is important to the story, so bear with me. When you walk in the front door, the kitchen is immediately to your left, and there's a short entrance hallway in front of you. The kitchen is an open countertop area that looks into the dining spot for a table, and a split-level living room den area that also had a sliding glass door that leads to the backyard. No fence for privacy, where there was a rather sad and sparse playground. In the hallway entrance again, on the right is a staircase that leads up to all of our bedrooms. One day after school, my brother and I are out playing in the backyard on the playground, doing our kid stuff, when my mom told us she wanted to go check the mail. The mailboxes for the apartments are located in the front entrance, which is on the opposite side of the complex from us. Naturally, me being 5 and Chris 9, my mom didn't want to leave us alone, especially since it was about to get dark outside. We came inside and got ready to leave. On the way out, I remember my mom asking Chris if he had closed and locked the sliding glass door. Chris said he had. Cut to when we were back from the mailroom. It's maybe been about 20 to 30 minutes max. It's hard to recall fully. My mom unlocks the apartment door. I'm lingering in the car for some reason or other. Chris doesn't notice I'm not in the apartment yet, and on the stairs leading to the bedroom on the right, he sees some feet disappear to the top of the landing, as if someone were running to hide. Thinking it was me, he didn't think anything was off. Chris goes into the kitchen, and I actually go upstairs directly into our bedroom to get ready for bed in the bathroom. My mom is at the table in the dining room area, near the split-level living area downstairs. While I'm completely clueless getting ready for bed in the bathroom, Chris from downstairs keeps hearing some noises walking around my mom's bedroom. Now, I had a bad habit at that age for going through people's stuff, not maliciously. I was barely 5, just curiosity. And Chris, thinking that I was being a nosy bastard going through all of my mom's jewelry, etc., runs upstairs to catch me in the act and get me in trouble. Chris runs up the stairs, sprints across the hallway to my mom's bedroom, and throws himself stomach first on the bed. When he looks up, he sees a tall, slender man with a bright green goblin latex Halloween mask on. and is holding a large knife he swiped from the kitchen. My brother sits silently in shock as the man in the mask raises a finger to his mouth, indicating for him to be quiet. And in the true form of my brother, he screamed bloody murder for my mom. At this point, I heard things going on, but I have no idea and am not aware of what's happening. I've gotten into my big oversized sleep shirt and am going downstairs to get a glass of milk before bed. When Chris screamed, the man ran downstairs and encountered my mom, who immediately jumped into action. Our baseball gear is near the living room, and my mom grabbed the bat and started fighting the man in our house while he's taking swipes at her with a knife. I first noticed what's happening when I came downstairs to the kitchen, pulled up a stool to reach the counter to pour a glass of milk, and that's when I see over the bar the guy push my mom off the step into the split-level living room, landing on her back. She starts swinging the bat wildly, trying to make contact with it, and she does. I'm glued to the image, truly frozen in place, not scared, just so young that I can't fully process what I'm seeing. The man finally runs towards the front door, which is right next to the kitchen. I'm mid-pouring my glass of milk, frozen, milk continuing to spill all over the counter and floor. He stops and turns directly to me, and in that green goblin mask with a knife, screams a primal, deep sound of rage and frustration, and then slams the door so hard the whole place shakes. I continue standing on the stool, pouring milk everywhere, frozen for what could have been seconds, but felt so long. I don't remember what happened after that, but all the parts that I've relayed are very clear to me. Moral of the story, lock your doors, and don't just assume that you did. And dear man in the goblin mask, let's not meet again. I was about 15 or 16, and my older brother that went to the same high school as me would drive us to school most days of the week, when our parents stopped wanting to get up early since we both had zero period that began at 7 a.m. One day on the way to school, we stopped at a donut shop that was in a sort of remote part of town, on a stretch of the highway. It was still kind of dark outside before 6:30 a.m. This was in the late 90s, before it was common for teenagers to have their own cell phones, so I didn't have a way to call or text. This shop had nothing around it except for trees and a stretch of empty land. The parking lot was too big for how small this place was. He didn't park us in the very front spot by the door, and to this day I have no idea why he didn't. He parked us about a row and a half from the front door and walked in. No one was at the counter, so I watched him wait for service. While he was waiting, my eyes wandered and panned suddenly to a man's face staring daggers at me from one of the tables in the shop. It was very startling. It was like in movies when they look through binoculars and see someone staring at them through a scope. I immediately looked away and down because it freaked me out. At first I thought maybe the man was just tired and just kind of spacing out because of how early it was, but I still felt his eyes on me after a few minutes, and although I fought myself to look up, I glanced up and he had a creepy smile on his face. He had short bobbed hair, like a dude would have in the 70s. I looked at my brother, and it felt like an eternity as he picked out donuts. He had turned around once, and I tried to get his attention, but he turned back around and kept choosing. When my brother was talking to the cashier, I noticed the man at the table get up. He never took his eyes off of me, and I remember my heart beating hard in my chest as I looked down since I couldn't think of anything else to do. I hoped that he would just walk away, but out of the corner of my eye I noticed he was approaching the truck. My first thought was to reach over and honk the horn as loud as I could, but he was already about one stride away from the truck driver's side, and I noticed then that the door hadn't auto-locked. It was the kind that had a little pop-up button lock. I only had seconds to choose to lock the door or honk the horn, so I practically leaped over, and I can remember slapping down the lock button. Not but 2 or 3 seconds later, the man pulled on the door handle. He turned and walked away, but then turned again and tried to pull harder. I then honked the horn to get attention, but I saw that my brother had walked to the other side of the counter, out of view. After I honked the second time, the guy walked off past the car, across the street, where it was a bit wooded before the highway resumed. When my brother came back, he asked me why I was honking and being impatient because it was still early and we wouldn't be late. After I told him that some creep tried to get in, he drove around the area, but no one was around since it had been 5 or more minutes before he got to the car. Creepy smiley zoned out donut shop guy. That's not me.